everybody. I am Sriram. I am professor in charge of Heritage Center. Heritage Center is very happy to organize this talk. We were a little concerned. This is kind of break time for students. So many students have gone home. I was just telling Kumaran also, I had a class yesterday of 40 students. Only 7 showed up for the class actually. It's okay. So, it's not the numbers, right? So, we are very happy we are able to organize this. Welcome to the Heritage Center. I hope we will be doing more of these as we go along. I request Kumaran, one of the key people running the Heritage Center, to introduce the speaker to all of you. Kumaran.
Dr. S.R. Ganesh. He is the director of research at Kalinga Foundation, Agumbe, Karnataka. And he has a doctorate in wildlife biology from the University of Madras. His chief interests lie in the field of systematic herpetology, and he documents lesser explored homes, refining species characterizations and mapping current distribution patterns of southern India's herpetofauna. So this is achieved from field work done for collecting baseline data, examining already existing voucher specimens in museums for taxonomic research, and carrying out mapping studies and analysis in GIS-based approaches. Hailing from Madras, Dr. S.R. Ganesh has also explored much of the Deccan Plateau, the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats, apart from the Coromandel coastal plains. A full-time academician, he has nearly 135 publications, mainly scientific journal articles including new species descriptions, books and book chapters to his credit. He has described or co-described some 25 new species of snake, lizard and frog. He co-mentors undergraduate and postgraduate zoology students in various colleges in Tamil Nadu, and he serves as the editorial board member and reviewer on over 20 Indian and international scientific journals. He has collaborated with the Amphibian and Reptile Specialist Group, the Viper Specialist Group, Skink Specialist Groups, SSC, Amphibia Web and EMBL Reptile Database, the first 3 groups being from the IUCN. He is an assessor for the ZSL Reptilia Group, the Zoological Society in London, and Camp Workshop on Reptiles India. He has also contributed to wildlife policy making and has served instrumentally in the declaration of many new protected areas such as sanctuaries and tiger reserves. In his capacity as a biodiversity board expert advisory member for herpetofauna in 4 South Indian states, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra and Karnataka, he closely networks with the forest departments and updates herpetological data of many protected areas. I invite Dr. Ganesh to make his talk.
At the outset, I thank the IIT Madras team for having me here and giving this opportunity to share with you some of the most important, neglected, understudied and whatnot species, reptiles and amphibians that are found in and around this metropolis of Madras. Next slide please. So this is to give you a broad overview of the national biodiversity with respect to herpetofauna. India has around 820 plus and counting species of reptiles, and we have around 400 different species, 460 species of amphibians. So we are talking about a fauna which is 1200 plus species in all of India is concerned. So we will be cherry picking just a few species based on the criteria, the one single criteria being widespread. How widespread are those few species that we are looking at now? So we are selecting those species which are fairly widespread all across the country, and we plan to take a look at some of the salient features and their names and forms. I'm just here to show you this is how they look and this is their names. That's all I plan to do. Just show you how they look like and tell you what their names are. That's what I'll be doing for the remaining most of my talk. because that's the most important take-home message that I wanted to convey. Wherever I am dealing with the venomous snakes, I'll be telling that yes, this is a venomous snake, failing which it is to be implied that every snake that we look at are harmless ones. So with this primer, I'm all set to go into the details. So Indotyphlops brahminus, this is the common worm snake or the blind snake, one of the most widespread, globally widespread species of snake, and one of the smallest also, it's just about 6 inches in length. That's how tiny it is. These are burrowing snakes. We have one more, beaked worm snake, extremely uncommon, but still not unheard of in and around Chennai. We do have records of this species in our place. This grows to around a foot or longer, much more thicker, much stouter, much longer species of worm snake. In fact, the largest of the worm snake species here we have in our country is this one, the beaked worm snake. Like all worm snake, it's a fossorial snake, which means it lives underground, and rarely during cool and rainy nights we get to see them out and active above the ground surface. We are now looking at the sand boa. Many people unfortunately mistake it or confuse it with vipers, especially the Russell's viper. If we are looking at a juvenile sand boa, chances are they mistake it for saw-scale viper, but these are different species. So the sand boa always have a very, very rough and short, blunt tail. That's one of the important features of this species. And the head is also more or less resembling the tail. So we have two species. This one is the common sand boa. These are constricting snakes, which means they tightly wrap around their prey species and engulf them after killing the prey. Something which the pythons also share in common with respect to the feeding ecology of the snake. This is the red sand boa. We all have heard stories about them, this has two heads and it goes for a part of the year that way and part of the year this way. It's all false, as we know. The truth is that it just has one head like every other snake, and the other end is just the tail. So why this species has this kind of a tail is because these are much more slow moving snakes, much more heavy bodied, hefty in build. So they are not adept at very quick escape. So when they are prodded upon or troubled by a predator organism, say like a mongoose or a bird of prey or any such animal, their defense mechanism is to hide the most vulnerable part of the body, the head, inside the body coils and put out and wag the tail at the outer part. So many mistake the blunt and thick and abruptly chopped off looking tail to the head, and unfortunately even many people mistake it for the same. This is the sand boa, red sand boa for you. Now, what is the speciality with respect to all these snakes, the worm snakes and the sand boas? They are like the only groups of snakes in our country which digs their own burrows and live underneath it, live inside. Many other snakes live in burrows. Water snakes live in crab holes, rat snakes and cobras, they live inside rodent burrows, but they are only tenants, they are not house owners. They are the snakes which dig their own holes and live in that. That's one of the unique features of the sand boas. This is a snake most of us would have seen. Many of us would have been, we have seen this snake. This is the rat snake. Black bars on the lips is a very important character to instantly recognize a rat snake. Round eyeball, the pupil will be round and the tongue will be black in color. These are some of the important salient features of the rat snake. So this snake is one of the largest of snakes that we have here. In fact, it's the third largest snake in the country. The first one being the pythons, the second one being the king cobra, and the third one is the rat snake. That's how big it can grow. We easily have average size growing up to 2 meters or more. That's how large the snakes can get. Completely non-venomous, so we don't need to fret or worry about it. So they do a very important service by keeping the rat and rodent population under control. That's one of the important ecological aspects of snakes that I want to highlight here. So this is called a trinket snake. Trinket means a necklace. So, because of the highly ornamented and beautiful pattern all along the body of the snake, it has gained the name trinket snake. If you can see, the forebody has a different pattern, the mid body has a different pattern, and the hind body and tail has a different pattern. So that there are 3 different kinds of pattern all put into this one single snake. That's one of the most beautiful and well patterned snake, which is why it has the name trinket snakes. They may be active during daytime or nighttime depending on the weather condition. If it's hot and summer condition, they become active during nighttime. If it is during the cool monsoon and the peak of the winter months, then they will be active during the daytime. It grows to about 1 meter in length, and it mostly lives in termite mounds or inside rubble piles and that sort of habitats. And then we move on to wolf snakes. These are snakes which are rather small, just 1.5 to maximum 2 feet in length. That's the average size of wolf snakes. Active during the night time. We have a few species, everything more or less look very similar to one another. They all have dark body with light cross bands across the body. That's one of the signatures pattern for the wolf snakes. So we will see how these wolf snakes look like. This is one of the most commonest of species, the common wolf snake. We have the slender wolf snake, which has some subtle characters and variations with respect to the common wolf snakes. And we also have the barred wolf snake, Lycodon striatus, which also is very similar to the previous 2 wolf snakes. Morphologically, ecologically, that is in terms of appearance, in terms of natural history and habitat, they all are very closely related and share a lot of facets and traits together. So as a group, these species of snakes are commonly to be seen at night in and around houses and other backyards, and wherever we have sightings of snakes, chances are we would have seen a wolf snake. Yes. So this snake is called as a bridal snake. This is again very much related to wolf snake, a bit more uncommon, and I have had the good fortune of direct sightings of bridal snakes from inside this very campus, IIT. We have had sightings of this uncommon species thanks to the good amount of greenery and vegetation cover that we have managed to save inside the campus, which is one of the sole reasons of it supporting the populations of snakes like the bridal snakes. Active during night time, ecologically and morphologically very similar to the previous species that we have seen, wolf snakes. It is so called because of this dark patch on the forehead, which suggests a bridal veil, and hence the name bridal snake. Completely non-venomous, often mistaken for the venomous kraits. We will come to that when we talk about the kraits in subsequent slides. For now, these are the groups of non-venomous snakes that we have. Much more slender, much more thin and elongate in their body build compared to the wolf snakes. And consequently, they are much more arboreal, which means the propensity of finding bridal snakes on plants, trees and branches is much more pronounced than when compared to the wolf snakes, which are a bit more thick and hefty. So in being light and elongate, a very sleek body build snake, they can support their body weight in much more small and tiny twigs and branches, so they can climb out and reach out more when compared to the wolf snakes. And then we have the kukri snake. Kukri is a Hindi word which means a dagger or a small hand knife. And why do we have this name? Same like how the wolf snakes, wolf family Canidae, canine teeth. So it's all a reference to the large canine teeth that these snakes have. In a similar way, like how wolf snakes have got the name after wolf, so here we have the kukri snakes which have got the name after their large canine teeth. They are not fangs, so they do not have venom. So it's non-venomous, that's just that they are enlarged maxillary teeth. That's all it is. Kukri snakes can be identified by their arrow-shaped marking on the top of the head. That's one of the important features to identify the kukri snakes. Unless the wolf snakes, they have the ground basal color will be light and the pattern on the body will be darker in coloration, whereas the converse of it is true in case of the wolf snakes. That is, the whole of the snakes will be dark in color and the pattern alone will be lighter in color. Right. So this is another kind of a kukri snake. It's called the streak kukri. Again, you have the characteristic arrow-shaped pattern on the top of the head. So this is again kukri snake, very similar to the preceding species of the kukri, the banded kukri. Because it has streaks, it is called streak kukri. The previous one, because it has black color bands, it is called banded kukri. So it's a very self-explanatory term. If we know the name of the snake, we can very easily relate to its appearance. So all the more it facilitates identifications of snakes by onlookers, right? If the person looks at the snake, watches it in close quarters, get to see it for an adequate amount of time so that they can register how the appearance and body pattern and coloration are, chances are we can very accurately make out the identification of the species involved. And now we are moving on to water snakes, the keelbacks. Why are they called keelbacks? Because each scale has a fold or keel on the top of the back. That's why it is called keelback. Why should they have that kind of a structure on their scales? Because I told you that they are water snakes, they live in much more wet, slushy and marshy conditions, where the substratum is much more loose, where you need to have your own friction and fulcrum to support to navigate through that kind of a slushy and muddy environment, which is why these snakes, the water snakes, have that kind of structures which will give them that extra push and nudge, so they can easily traverse and navigate through that kind of a habitat. Okay, so this is a striped keelback for obvious reasons. It has two parallel yellow stripes down its body, which is why it is called a striped keelback. Always stripes are pattern, linear pattern, which run along the body axis. Parallelly along the body axis is a stripe. If you find it across transversely, perpendicular to the body axis, then they are called as crossbars, crossbands. So these are the different terminologies with respect to the pattern of the snakes. So this is striped keelback, one of the few snakes active during daytime. Apart from rat snakes, this is one of the snakes which are diurnal, which are active during the daytime. Feeds on frogs and sometimes crabs. These are the major diet of the striped keelback. And then this is the checkered keelback. Again, for obvious reasons, you have the black checkered pattern like a chessboard, a checkered board pattern all along the back, which is why it is called a checkered keelback water snake. A larger growing species which can easily reach 4 feet or more, and it has a good affinity to be found in and around the water bodies. That's the checkered keelback water snake for us. It eats fish and frogs and crabs, and it's found in crab holes, active during twilight hours and during the night time, especially during the rainy season. And then you have the olive keelback. Again, it's self-explanatory. The top of the back is olive or bottle green in color, whereas the underside is a beautiful lemon yellow. That's one of the identification features of the olive keelback water snake. As I told with respect to the other two water snakes, the other two keelbacks, it also lives in marshy substratum, also lives in waterlogged areas, also resides inside crab holes. It also feeds on fishes, frogs and crabs. Then you have the bronze-backed tree snake. So we started with the burrowing snakes, and then we moved on to the land snakes, and then we moved on to the water snakes, and now we are moving on to the tree snakes. So we are looking at different varieties and classes of snakes. This is the tree snake, which implies that it has a much longer and thinner body build, and it is predominantly found on bushes and plants and trees. That's where you get to see them, not exactly on the ground. So this is one of the fastest moving snakes we get to see in and around Madras. So in this region, one of the fastest of snakes that we have is the bronze-backed tree snake. In split second, it moves so fast that it's hard for even for your eye to follow where it goes. That's how fast it goes. Very fast moving snake, active during daytime, fond of basking right in the morning hours when the first rays of the sun hits the plant. So this species, you can get to see it basking on the plants and trees and bushes. Wherever there is nice good sunlit patches available, you get to see this bronzeback tree snakes. It feeds on nestling birds, it feeds on lizards and tree frogs. These are some of the important prey species of the bronzeback tree snake. Why is it called so? You can see a bronze colored stripe all across the back of the snake, which is why it is called the bronzeback. And then we have the green vine snake or the green whip snake. This is one of the few unmistakable snakes. There is no snake in our place which resembles this species, right? We cannot confuse or mix up the identity of this species with any other species which we get to see here. This snake has one of the most peculiar thing with respect to its eyes. It has horizontal pupil, horizontally elliptical pupil. That's one of the important features of the green vine snake. And it also has concave face. Part of the face near the snout on both sides is concave. Like, it has a ditch this way and that way, which enables almost binocular vision for this particular species. Highly visually oriented, lives on trees and bushes. It depends on its superb camouflage. We will barely be able to notice or make out the presence of a green vine snake in a tree or a branch because of its coloration. That's how easily it blends into its surrounding and makes it a very good candidate for camouflage. So it can grow to large length, like it can reach easily some 2 meters or so, but it's very thin, right? Such a long snake will be only as thick as our thumb. That's how thick the snake can get. A very slim and elongate bodied snake, which is a typical build for most of the tree snakes. Then we have the common cat snake. This is the night active tree snake in our country. The previous two species of tree snakes, the bronzebacks and the green vine snake, are active during daytime, whereas this one is active during the night time. Again, it has the typical slender, elongate body build which is present in most of the tree snakes. Unlike the common vine snake or the bronzeback, this one is extremely habitat specific. When there is any disturbance to the habitat, this will be one of the first few snakes to get eliminated from the system, to get locally extirpated from the area when you have habitat disturbance that crosses a threshold limit. Then we will be losing this species once for all. That's how fragile these species are. This is mildly venomous, like the green vine snake. What exactly does this imply? It implies that they have rear fangs. That is, they have fangs which are the venom injecting teeth, not situated at the front of the upper jaw, but towards the rear part, the end or backwards of the upper jaw. And they have toxic saliva, which is inconsequential should a bite happen to a human being, but it will be of some consequence and effect for the intended prey species, the small-bodied prey species, which it's supposed to bite and consume. That kind of animals, say a small sparrow or a frog or a lizard. When that kind of small-bodied animals get bitten and injected with the venom or toxin of this snake, they get paralyzed, they get affected, because that's what it is meant for. That's what is called a mildly venomous snake. So we have a few mildly venomous snake like the green vine snake and the cat snakes. So this is called a dog-faced water snake. It may have a funny name, but this is one of the snake which lives in the mangrove swamps of our place. We all live in Madras, a coastal town. So we share the whole eastern edge of our city is nothing but the coast, nothing but the sea. And you also have a few rivers confluencing into the sea, like for example the Adyar estuary, which is not far from where we are now. So you have patches of mangroves, patches of that kind of estuarine and lagoon vegetation where you have brackish water body, which is half saline water and half fresh water. In that kind of unique ecosystems, you have this kind of the snake, the mangrove water snake. So it eats on crabs and fishes and lobsters and that type of animals, grows to about 2.5 feet in length, and it mainly inhabits the holes that the crabs make in the mangroves. Have you heard about these fishes called mud skippers? Mud skippers, that's one of the favorite prey of the dog-faced water snake. Often in time when we go to the mangroves and try to watch these snakes, we see them frantically chasing the mud skippers as they plan to eat them. Yeah. And now from the mangrove we are directly going into the ocean, into the sea. Yes, you have sea snake. We have around 8 species of sea snakes in Chennai coast. I have recorded around 8 species in the Chennai coast, and this is the commonest of the lot. It's called as the beaked or hook-nosed sea snake. Highly venomous, right? And all sea snakes, true sea snakes, can be instantly recognized by their flat paddle-shaped tail. An oar-shaped or paddle-shaped tail which it uses for swimming. That's one of the take-home message. Like if you look at the tail and this is how it is, we can be sure that we are looking at a sea snake. That's how unique that particular identification character is for this group. Feeds mainly on fishes and eels. These are the exclusive prey for the sea snakes. And then we have the slender coral snake. Coral snake, widespread but extremely uncommon, very rare. In many decades, I would have seen only a bunch of coral snakes. That's how rare it is. So every coral snake finding is a very precious finding. We can, recollect how a shoelace looks like, right? That's how the coral snake will be in its dimensions. That very small, that very slim and thin. That's how the coral snake look like. Venomous, right? They are venomous, they are front fang, they are related to cobras and kraits, but super tiny and small. Fortunately for us, their head, their mouth, their teeth, they are so minute that they can't even open their mouth properly and give a proper bite. Like, they can't even puncture human skin, adult human skin, and typically envenomate, leading to a bleeding injury where the venom mixes with the blood of the victim. So because of that, technically speaking, this is not a very dangerous snake or a medically important snake, but theoretically, yes, it's a venomous snake. It belongs to family Elapidae. It has front fangs, it has venom glands and all that. Yeah, this is coral snake for you. Why are they called as coral snakes? Because their ventral is coral red in color. That's one of the important features of this snake. And you have the head and the tail region which has black coloration, and the tip of the tail underneath is sky blue. This is one of the unique colors we get to see in any snakes in our country. And then, now we come to those snakes for which we have to be scared for good and sufficient reasons. These are the big 4 venomous snakes of our country. The 4 widespread medically important snakes of India, all the 4 are present in the outskirts of Madras. The first of the lot is the common krait, right? So it grows to around, average length is around 3 feet, but its maximum length can grow up to 5 feet. It's a much larger growing snake, highly lustrous as you can see from this picture, fully dark black, jet black in coloration with a series of bands across. And many of you might recollect that the wolf snakes were very similar to this group, the kraits. But please keep one important point in mind. Wolf snakes has more prominent banded pattern in the forebody, and the bands will fade away as we progress to the tail. But in kraits, the opposite is true. The banded pattern will be more prominent near the tail in the hind body, and the neck will be devoid of bands. That's one of the major identification characters for the kraits and the wolf snakes. We also have much more subtle scalation features, but I don't want to go into details because I want to keep it as a general talk. Right. So, because it's a venomous snake, I'll talk a little bit about their venom, toxin and qualities also. just a one-liner. So kraits have neurotoxic venom, venoms which affect the central nervous system. So they do not attack anything else, to the effect that most doctors find it very hard to even detect crate bites. Even the victims, they don't realize that they have been bitten by a snake at all. That's the most dangerous and misleading part of the crate bites, right? But soon you have a rapid onset of paralysis which will lead to coma and death if untreated. Fortunately, most of the hospitals that we have here, especially the government-run hospitals, they all have adequate stock and associated medical care facilities for treating bites by the crate. This is a snake which doesn't need any introduction. All snakes is this snake. Whatever snake we see, this is the snake we tell that we saw, right? So this is the cobra, and mind you, it won't be hood spread all the time. Not at all, right? When you see it moving, it will look just like any other snake. Unless it is sufficiently provoked or threatened or excited for some reason, it won't be spreading open or flaring open its hood. Okay, so that is with respect to the cobras. It can grow up to 5 feet in length. And when we compare the similar looking rat snake and the cobra, look at the face, you do not have black bars on the lips, and the entire eye is black. You do not see the eyeball visibly as in the case of rat snake. And we don't get to see the tongue in this picture, but please take my words, the tongue of the cobra is red in color, whereas the tongue of the rat snake is black in color. These are the major differentiating features with respect to the cobras and the rat snake. Throughout most of the body, the cobras have white patterns, whereas the rat snake has blackish patterns. Most of the other random, hard to describe patterns that we see on the body of the snake will all be black for the rat snake, and it will all be white for the cobra. These are some of the important features we need to focus to understand, what snake are we looking at. This is a Russell's viper. So it's named after a scientist called Dr. Patrick Russell, who is hailed as the father of Indian ophiology, the study of snakes in this country. He lived in the 1790s, stationed as a medical doctor in Visakhapatnam, and he was the one who conducted the first and foremost of modern scientific studies on snakes anywhere in the whole of Asia. That's how old and significant his contributions have been. So as a mark of tribute and respect and to commemorate his solid contributions, people have named this species after him. It's called Russell's viper. So this is often mistaken for non-venomous snakes like sand boas, or if the snake happened to be big enough for a python. Most of those snakes will be not with keeled scales like this. And much more importantly, look at the regular chain-like pattern. Very symmetrically arranged, easy to describe regular chain-like pattern. Whereas for sand boas or pythons, it is the irregular random blotches all across. That is a non-venomous snake. If we have regular chain-like pattern like this, we are sure that we are looking at a venomous snake, Russell's viper. And when we actually come across this species of snake in the nature, like how we were looking at the cobras. Cobras also, apart from flaring open their hood, their other mechanism for self-defense is to hiss. They forcefully inhale and exhale and give out a hissing sound. So this does it in a much more profound way. So the loudest of all hissing sounds of any snake in India is from this snake. A very loud and sustained hiss. If you hear that hissing sound, you won't forget it for the rest of your life. That's how loud it is. And the reason being, this is one of the only snakes in India which has a nostril that's larger in size than the eye, right? So that's why when the animal exhales, the whole volume of air, it's big enough to go inside the large lung cavity and then it resonates when it forcefully exhales. So that is the Russell's viper for us. It lives in thick, impenetrably thorny and bushy vegetations. That's where we find Russell's viper. Often their favorite haunts are under the thickets of lake bund or furrows or munds present in paddy fields and farmlands. That's the place where we get to see the Russell's viper the most. Active mainly during the twilight hours, especially during the rainy seasons. This is the saw-scale viper. It may look very big and intimidating in this photo, but in reality, it just grows to 1 feet, right? As big as our pen or pencil. That's the size of this particular snake. But still, it has very sharp and penetrating fangs, and it's considered as one of the medically important big 4 venomous snakes of our country, right? You see this plus mark on top of the head. That's the important feature to identify the saw-scaled viper. One of its look-alike is the common cat snake. But cat snakes are much more smooth and lustrous bodied snake, much more thinner and elongate and longer in their body build, and those are the differences with the saw-scale viper. If you look at this part of the body, right, you will see very high degree of rough and keeled scales. So what this snake does is it will repeatedly rub their body coils on to one another. Thereby it produces a mechanical rasping sound. That is the defense mechanism for the saw-scaled vipers. One of the smallest of our venomous snakes, like what we told about the slender coral snake, a much small growing snake, but nevertheless this is a medically important snake. A lot of potential dangerous and lethal bites are attributed to the saw-scaled vipers. We find this species in much more open, sandy or stony, gravelly terrain with very little vegetation. It's not so fond of dense and bushy areas, but rather open, thin, thorny scrub, semi-arid desert kind of regions. That's the place where we find the saw-scaled vipers. You all would have seen, in televisions, you would have seen this sidewinder snake on desert sand dunes. So this snake is directly related to that, right? This is one of the direct relatives of that kind of snake present in these parts of India, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the venom of the vipers. I told about the krait and cobras. They have predominantly neurotoxic venom, whereas this one, the saw-scale, and much more importantly the Russell's viper, they have hemotoxic venom which affects the cardiovascular system, that is the blood and the heart and the associated blood vessels. So as the consequence of their bite, the blood pressure drops, the heart rhythm gets completely disturbed, the clotting factor of the blood completely goes out of gear. Blood is one of the best known buffers, right? I'm slightly moving away from herpetology, but just to put the point clear, blood is one of the best known buffer solutions in nature. Imagine what it can take for any chemical substance to go and alter and impair the consistency, the structure, the texture, and the chemistry of the blood. That's what the viper venom does to the blood of the prey or predator species, right? Again, as I told you, most of the hospitals in this region, especially the government ones, where we have the polyvalent antivenom serum. It's just one-shot cure. So it is made from by mixing up the venom samples of all the 4 snakes, the cobras, the kraits, the Russell's viper, and the saw-scale viper. In effect, it will address and cure the bites of any of these 4 species. And apart from these 4 species, it is highly untenable, completely unlikely for someone in this place to be bitten by another kind of venomous snake. Unheard of. Therefore, this is what is currently present in vogue. That's all with snakes. Now we are moving on to lizards. We have a few families of lizards, right? This is the gecko, which we all see in the houses near about our, wherever we have buildings, on our walls, we get to see this. This is active during night time. Insectivorous animals. The next is the spotted gecko. As you can see, it has lots of spots and very rough up and down tuberculate skin on the back. That's one of the important identification characters for the spotted house gecko. Then this is the bark gecko. It lives primarily on the trees, especially tamarind trees. You know, we have a lot of avenue trees near about our streets and homes and backyards. So this is a species highly prevalent in that kind of habitats and regions. So it has a wavy zigzag pattern of light and dark alternating coloration along their back. So it comes in several color phases. Some of them are light, some of them are dark in color. And then we have the termite hill gecko. This is somewhat uncommon when compared to the other geckos, and it is mainly present on the ground. So on top of every raised structure and tubercle, you can see those white dots, and it has a habit of living in termite mounds, feeding on the termites and insects, and hence the name termite hill gecko. Okay. All the geckos are nocturnal animals. They are active during the night time. They are all insectivorous. They all lay eggs, and as a rule, they all lay only 2 eggs. The clutch size of almost 99% of geckos globally is just 2, right? Now we are moving on to other families of lizard called the dragon lizards. So you have the garden lizard, again no stranger to most of you. The default lizard that we all see, especially during daytime in our gardens, is this species. Males and females look different, right? They are dimorphic species. The gender has a role in the appearance. The male lizard and the female lizard, though belonging to the same species, will be different in their appearance and looks. That is one of the features of the garden lizard. Look how it has got a very long tail, which is an indication for their arboreal habits. They live on trees and branches, so this will help it balance when it is moving around on the bushes and trees. Active during daytime, insectivorous animal. So they come out and they come to the ground, dig a nest, deposit all the eggs, cover it up again and go. That's how they reproduce. So this is called a fan-throated lizard. Most of you might have seen this species. So this, you have a dewlap or a throat fan, which is why it is called as a fan-throated lizard. Again, like how I told you about the dimorphism, this character represents only in the males of the lizard. The females of the same species will lack this particular appendage because it has got a reproductive function. In what way? Because they advertise their presence, they guard their territory, and they avoid and repel other males by flaring open their fan throat. That is one of the important characters of this species. Very small and terrestrial lizard. It lives on the ground, right? That's the fan-throated lizard. Active during daytime. Highly habitat-specific species. Like how we spoke about the cat snakes, this is an extremely habitat-specific lizard. Any amount of disturbance, if we do to the grassland, then this will be one of the first species to get completely eliminated from the system. It requires grassland, right? Most unfortunately, many of the policymakers and area managers, they can't take grasslands as grasslands, right? They see it as just scope and space for afforestation or doing something else there, right? Which is one of the important reasons why we are losing this population at an alarming rate now. This is a chameleon. Primarily African and Madagascan family of lizards. We have one species here in the Indian Peninsula, that's the Asian chameleon. Active during the daytime. Now this is sleeping at night, which is why you see this kind of coloration. And it's famous for multiple reasons. We all know that it has the ability to change the color of their skin tone. That doesn't mean it can become red and blue and all that, right? So it can become from fluorescent yellowish green across various shades of green till dark green. So it's essentially a green lizard. You can't expect it to be any other color except green. It will always stay green, but within green, you have a whole range of greens which can, you can find this lizard in any of those colors. That's the chameleons for you. So they have tails which can hold and grasp the branches. We call it as prehensile tail, right? It uses the tail as a fifth limb, as a fifth leg. So it just uses only the fore, but it also can suspend itself completely just with the tail. And it also has a very long sticky tongue, which it shoots out and grab the insect prey that it eats. How long is it? As long as its entire body. That's one of the longest of the tongues for any of the lizards that we have, which is why this is a unique feature for the lizard. And they also have opposable thumbs, just like us. In technical terms, we call it zygodactylic feet, opposable thumbs. So this is a lizard which has that kind of a structure present in their forelimbs and hind limbs, both the hands and the feet. They have that kind of structure which it uses to grasp tiny twigs and branches with amazing dexterity. That's not all. So it has an eye which can independently see and rotate for 360 degrees. That's one of the very unique and mind-boggling feature with respect to the chameleons. So that's the chameleons for you. And then we have the monitor lizard. This is the largest of lizards that we have in our country. We have 4 species and only one of them is highly widespread here in and around Madras. Only in the far outskirts near the neighboring districts and their borders or inside protected areas like the Gindi National Park or Nanmangalam Reserve Forest or any such protected areas, we have the monitor lizards. Unfortunately, this is a species that have been heavily hunted and poached by people in the past, which has decimated the populations of this lizard. Right? Active during daytime, very voracious predator and eclectic in their habit. It grows to a large size. It grows to easily 5 feet. That's as tall as a human being is. One of the important characters of monitor lizards is, in the whole world, this is the only group of lizard or any other animal apart from snakes which has a tongue which is structurally and functionally similar to that of snakes. Remember, snakes have forked tongue, right? And they use their forked tongue for olfactory functions. Just like how we smell with our nose, snakes do that with their tongues. On similar lines, this is the only other animal in the world, the monitor lizards, which mimic the same kind of structure and function with their tongue like the snake. That's the important feature for the monitor lizard. And then we move on to the skinks. Active during daytime, very fast moving, shiny, sun-loving animals. These are the skinks. So we have a few species. This is called the keeled grass skink because of the keeled scales. One of the largest and commonest of skinks that we can see in our place is this one. And then we have the bronze skink because of its bronze coloration, somewhat smaller, and this is restricted to much more vegetated areas and leaf litter than when compared to the keeled skink. And then this one, the one with the red tail. Many of you would have seen it. Many of you would have been familiar with this species. This is called the snake skink because of its tiny limbs and much more elongate snake-like body build. This is called the spotted snake skink or the supple skink. Again, as the animal grows, the contrasting tail color will gradually disappear, leaving out a much more drab and brown colored tail. And then we have another uncommon and rare species of skink called the white dotted skink. So you have the white colored dots all across the flank and throat area of the lizard, which is why this species has such a name, the white dotted skink. Right. So we looked at many of the lizards and we have read that some lizards can shed and regrow their tail. Is it not? Yes. So only a few lizards are capable of achieving that feat. Who are they? The skinks can do that and the geckos can do that. Agumbe lizards cannot. Monitor lizards cannot. Chameleons cannot. These lizards cannot do that, but the skinks can do that and the geckos can do that. Right, so now we move on to the amphibians. This is the final part of our talk where we are wrapping up with the amphibians. This is the commonest of all amphibians we ever see, right? The common toad. Very typical with its rough and warty texture of the skin and this kind of bumpy feature that the skin of the toad has. It jumps to rather small distances when we imagine a typical frog can jump, right? That's a common toad for us. It grows to much larger size, active during night time and completely insectivorous in its diet. You have a few more species of toads which are much more rare and range restricted. So you have this dwarf toad which is much smaller, highly tuberculate in its appearance, and it's not that common to find in all places. This is an indication for intact habitat. So wherever we find frogs, amphibians like this, it's an indication to highly undisturbed and intact habitat, because they are highly habitat specific species which cannot tolerate disfigurement or habitat beyond a certain point. Very small in size when compared to the previous species. This is an even more rare and uncommon toad that we have here. I have barely seen it a few times myself in this place. This is called Dattaphanes peninsularis, the Deccan toad. In all of the peninsular India, we have this species. The skin will be much more smooth and much more wet, and the toad will be a bit larger in size than when compared to the common toad. This is also like super rare species. Not that common to see, but nevertheless it's widespread. All across the southern India, you have this particular species. They live in fallow lands, they live near croplands and agricultural fields anyway, but everywhere they are uncommon. In places where they occur in good numbers, but it's highly patchily distributed. That's the Deccan toad for you. And then we move on to the small-mouthed frogs. This is one of the smallest amphibians of India. It will be, the adult frog will be the size of our fingernail, our thumbnail, right? That's how big this frog is. That's how the adult size can get. That's how tiny this frog is. But for its size, it makes a very piercing, echoing and deafening sound, right? When we try to source the origin of the call and go again looking and peering through vegetation for hours and hours on end, we'll be surprised to find this tiny fellow sitting there in the bush and making such a loud call. It can be heard for quite a distance, all emanating from this small little frog. So this is the microhyla frog. Can we move to the previous slide, please? So you see this disc near the eye, that's called the eardrum. The eardrum of the amphibian will mostly be visible, except for frogs of this particular group. So all the microhyla, the small-mouthed frogs, will have hidden tympanum. The eardrum we will not be able to make out as a circular disc. That is one of the identification characters of the microhyla frogs. This is called a red microhylid, Microhyla rubra, somewhat larger in size than the preceding species, but equally uncommon, much rarer, much more patchily distributed, much more hard to find. That's the Microhyla rubra. And then you have the variegated frog. Because of its variegated appearance, you can see there is no indication of a round tympanum or eardrum in this frog. The whole frog is dark with some patches of light and golden yellow in color, very small in size, just 1 to 2 inches long, that's all. That's the variegated frog, highly smooth, and whenever we pick it up or attack, or when it is being handled or physically restrained, it has the habit of exuding some fluid from their skin. That's one of the predator avoidance strategy that we get to see in this group of frogs. This is called a painted balloon frog or a painted frog. So This is again related to the previous species of frog that we told. A very thick and plump looking frog which has orange and black patches all across their body, and the fingers have elongate tips on the digits. That's one of the identification characters of this particular frog. And then you have the balloon frog. As their name suggests, they are very much squat and round in their body build and structure. They look like a balloon, and the snout part is particularly blunt. That's one of the features of the balloon frog. Again, tympanum is not visible. We can't make out the tympanum because it belongs to that particular family of frog, Microhylidae. Active during night time and insectivorous like all other frogs, and this is much more fossorial in nature. It's found in and around debris and underneath logs and stones. And then we have the tree frog. This is one of the few tree and bush dwelling amphibians that are present in our region. The only one is the tree frog. And tree frog can be identified by a rough skin on the underside. So the underside skin will be smooth for most of the frogs, and only the back will be rough. Whereas for tree frogs, the underside skin will be rough and textured, whereas the back will be smooth. And also, like how we spoke about in the green vine snake, the same point is present here too. The eyeball will largely be elliptical. Horizontally elliptical eyeball is an important character of the tree frog. And then we move on to the aquatic frogs. We spoke about the terrestrial frogs, about the tree frog, and now we move on to the water dwelling or aquatic frogs. So this is a rather small sized frog which has a bronze olive coloration. That's the paddy field frog because it lives mainly in and around the paddy fields. And then we move on to bullfrogs. We have two species of bullfrog. This is the Indian bullfrog, which has a much more pointed snout, a much more thinner body, and a much more longer limb, right? We won't be able to make sense about these subtle differences, but we will immediately realize when I show you the next picture. This is Hoplobatrachus tigrinus, Indian bullfrog. Just keep this picture in your mind. See that? That's the difference. Snout somewhat less pointed, the limbs somewhat short, and the body is much more squat. Very minor differences. Unless we continually keep seeing many times both these frogs, it's not that easy for us to make out what is what. Yeah. This is Hoplobatrachus crassus or the Jordan's bullfrog. And then we have the green pond frog, Euphlyctus hexadactylus. This is just a leaf sticking onto the body. I should clarify that first. So this is one of the few frogs in this region which is green on top, and it's thoroughly aquatic. It lives on ponds and stagnant water bodies. And then we have the skipper frog, which is related to the previous species, somewhat smaller in its size, and it has an olivaceous coloration with dark and light patches on them. That's the skipper frog for us. And then we have the burrowing frogs. We have two species of burrowing frogs which have extremely short snout, right? Breviceps. Brevis means short. Ceps is a reference to cephalum or head. So it directly translates into short-headed frogs. That's the burrowing frog. As its name implies, most of the peak summer they aestivate or burrow deep under the ground during the daytime and emerge during the monsoons at night for carrying out their breeding and other activities. Yeah, so this is the last species that we will be looking at. This is Sphaerotheca pluvialis, another species of burrowing frog. Again, as I told you, very subtle features of their body and face and head for us to understand and differentiate. One of the important characters of burrowing frogs is this heel spur. You have a spur-like feature present on the heel, which it uses to dig down the sand and create a burrow for us to live inside. Yeah. So these very species, right? So we talked about a lot of snakes, lots of lizards and lots of amphibians. Put together, it's easily around 50 species, everything combined. So we have so many kinds of reptiles and amphibians in and around our city, right? But most often the lay person, an average Chennaiite, so to speak, would be able to see maybe 10% of this or even less. And even if those who see, they will barely be able to recognize that this is what they have seen, which is what we need. I am aiming to kind of improve the situation a bit. Whereas just by understanding and appreciating the much higher diversity of reptiles and amphibians, I'll be glad to get you to, empathizing for them, minding them, and having a positive concern for their well-being and survival. Okay, so with this, I plan to finish my today's session. Thank you for having me here again. I'll be happy to take questions from any of you.